Every single person who is or ever has been an entrepreneur has experienced the feelings of chasing, the feeling of wanting so badly to be able to enjoy what you have, see the ability to be able to enjoy what you have, to be able to truly feel what you've already created. And for so many of us, myself included, it feels terrifying to let ourselves relax into that. And so I want to talk about today how you can actually stop the energy of chasing all the time and truly embrace right now. And before I get into this, I think it's worth clarifying that one of the hardest things for me personally, and for a lot of my clients that we've talked through, is that when you run a business, realistically, you have to run that business, meaning that you carry a heavier load, you carry a level of responsibility that remains constant. And that can be truly exhausting. And so while we can't take away that responsibility without taking away the business, we have to figure out ways that we can alleviate some of that pressure, because a lot of times that pressure is more internal than external. And when we feel that internal pressure, when we're putting self-imposed urgency, when we have our eyes locked and focus forward, there's a lot of reward that comes from that. And so we can see drastic increases and changes for the better in our business from, going after it and running through that wall and chasing and breaking through barriers and like all of these things. And there's a level of that is definitely required for entrepreneurship because resilience is necessary. But there's also this balance that we have to find to where it's like, if we live in that constant energy of chasing, we are so exhausted that it's not sustainable. And I know this for a fact, being an entrepreneur going into my 14th year, how I have oscillated between like just pushing so hard and like going after my goals and like being so driven and so ambitious, and then being like, oh my gosh, I'm so ambitious and so focused on all the things in front of me that I want, that I'm failing to recognize what I've already done. Right. And so you've probably seen this in yourself, to where it's like, we're very goal oriented. We're very, again, focused forward. And there's nothing wrong with that, because we're supposed to evolve as people. We're supposed to be moving forward, but we're also not evaluating exactly like, what is forward momentum? What does that actually look like? What does it feel like? What are the things that I'm qualifying as forward momentum? And so it keeps us in this like hungry position to where we're essentially starving and there's a lot of scarcity. And it keeps us locked in that position, which is actually one of the ways that we burn out emotionally. Because a lot of times people will talk about burnout, but they talk about it from a place of workload, right? And when I'm working with clients, this is why we address the internal operating system of you as the CEO. And then we're also addressing the tactical pieces of the business that are causing the pressure and the overwhelm, et cetera. So in this instance, if we want to make peace with where we are and what we've built already, and if we want to set ourselves up for longevity and sustainability, then we know from what I talked about last week, we need some sort of periodization in the business, right? We need a level of like periods where we kind of pull back and reflect and rest. And then we need periods where we do push. But really, it's about what sort of energy are we carrying when we push? And then in those push seasons, how is it affecting us emotionally, right? So when we're constantly chasing the next thing, what we don't realize is this is fear-based action that is rooted in scarcity. We're chasing the next best thing because we're afraid that what we have right now won't last. Like, how many times have you had the thought, and we've all had it, myself included, of like just that fear of failure, right? We have this deep desire for like safety and stability, but our scarcity tells us when we've created it and when it's there and when the wealth has been built, the financial freedom is there, and we're like, it's not enough. What if it all goes away? What if you fall behind? What if, all of your customers leave? Like, these are the things that throw us back into that cycle of like running and chasing and making sure we're doing all the things. And we're not stopping to step back and ask ourselves, are the things we're doing actually impacting this? And then when I'm taking action on these things, what sort of energy am I bringing to those things? Right? Because an abundance mentality, somebody who feels trusting and full and whole, there's this level of like, there's no neediness there. It's more so just, again, full trust of like, I know that the work that I do within my business and my team does within my business is providing a great impact. And because of that, because we are leading with value and with impact, there will always be more. And we logically can know that, and we can do the meditations and we can tell ourselves all these things. And then we still get caught up in like, okay, once I reach this milestone, like that's where I'm going to be happy. Once I reach this level, that's when I'll be able to relax or rest or pull back or not push as hard, right? And the truth is that if we want to embrace right now, if we want to really have the permission to be present in what we've created, there is a level of discomfort that we have to experience that most people are not ready for, myself included. The battle of exiting a scarcity mentality, when a lot of times for us entrepreneurs, we are great entrepreneurs because we maybe grew up in scarcity, because we've had real life scarcity. I didn't grow up with money and abundance. I didn't see that practice by either of my parents, right? And so depending on what your childhood looked like, depending on what your relationship with money is, all of these things play a factor. And so when we think about, okay, I am always chasing after the next thing and it's exhausting me, but how do I still be ambitious, still be goal-oriented, still achieve the things that I want to achieve? But how do I do that not at the expense of my emotional health? How do I do that in a way that also allows me to feel the impact that I've already made? And so a lot of this is going to be around allowing yourself that time and space to think and to reflect, which we don't give because we're so forward focused. So much like I talked about periodization last week, to where it's pushing and pulling, it's also about what you're doing in the push and pull. And so in the pull back, this is where the reflection time sits. This is where you really build your self-confidence, your self-worth, your pride. You recognize yourself. You give yourself the validation that maybe you've been seeking externally, right? And it's a place for celebration. It's a place for us to really step back into that overview position that we don't allow ourselves to go in, because we're like, if I do that, then I will fail. And so we have to challenge the thoughts that don't allow us to pull back. We have to challenge the thoughts that don't allow us to rest. We have to define, like, what does it look like when I'm resting? Because a lot of times we go to extremes, right? To where it's like, well, I can't just do nothing. And we can't just do nothing because we're business owners. But what does it look like for us to have periods to where we do allow ourselves that time to reflect, to where we are solely focused on sustaining what we have built? Because so much momentum and so much energy is built there. And not only that, but when you give yourself that time, what happens within that time is you're showing yourself it's safe. And so this is the discomfort that I'm talking about, because in our heads, we have this idea of abundance and being full and being whole. When you are there, it feels really good. And yes, when you are there, it feels really good. But getting there when you've been chasing out of scarcity is a long road that requires a lot of challenges. And I know this from personal experience. It requires you actively breaking patterns from the thoughts that you're thinking and the behaviors that you're doing. It requires you looking at anything that you have done that's in a pattern of chasing and then actively choosing the opposite, which when you do that, your brain is like, no, you're not safe, because our brains, that's their job. They want us to be safe. And what our brains think is safe is what we know. And so if we have built something really great by chasing, by doing a lot, by overextending ourselves, by pushing consistently, by exhausting ourselves, by not sleeping, what we have learned and what we have taught ourselves and what we have ingrained in our belief systems is that that's what gets us results. And so in order to show ourselves and give ourselves the data that shows the opposite, it requires us actually putting ourselves in the position to see that, which is the uncomfortable part, because you cannot any longer practice those same behaviors. You cannot follow through with the actions that come from the fear-based thinking that once did, right? So if you think about, like, let's say a client ends their contract, right? If your behavior is to take that and instantly go in, okay, we need to source this many leads and you go into this hyper overdrive mode versus stepping back and being like, okay, what happened here? Am I actually safe? Like, is the business at risk? Is family at risk? And like taking time to actually process the emotions around it and then formulating a plan. Like, we don't do that first part, right? Because we're so afraid of losing it all. And our thoughts, will start spiraling. Oh, this person quits. What if another person quits? All of those feelings start arising in us. And then we're like, maybe I should just quit. Should I go get a job? Should I? And you can play that out. That's one of the things that I'll have clients do when they start having these like scarcity-based thoughts, is I'm like, let's play it all the way through. What's the worst case scenario? And what would you do? And then what would you do? And then would you do? And before you know it, if you're asking yourself this question, you see like, you're still alive. You're still okay. Nothing's actually going to completely take you out. Nothing's going to kill you. Nothing's going to, but again, it's just our brains trying to keep us safe. And our brains believe what is safe is what we know. And so to embrace now, to be able to be actually present, it requires us being uncomfortable. It requires us hearing the thoughts that we're thinking about how we need to chase or how we need to do more or whatever it is. And then saying, I'm not going to do that because I trust in myself. I trust in my team. I trust in the systems that I've set up. Which, as a side note, if we're trying to create safety and stability in our businesses and they feel heavily disorganized because there hasn't been systems or structure put in place that are actively working to bring you new business, like that's why that external and the pieces of the business, I have to address that with clients. That's why we work on the tactical pieces in your business, because there is connectivity there, right? Because if the only way that you're getting clients is by like knocking on doors and you're exhausted from knocking on doors all the time, it's like, well, we need to develop new ways that don't require such a high level of output from you, right? But again, that requires like the level of fear of like, well, this is the way that I've always done it. And I hear you, like, I totally get that. But just because it's the way that you've always done it doesn't mean that it's going to be the right way for how you're evolving and how you want to feel in your life, right? So I want you to think about like, what do you actually want? What do you actually want? What do you want your business? How do you want it to serve you? And how do you want it to serve others? What does that actually look like? Because the other thing about this is a lot of times we're chasing goals that aren't even ours. We're chasing goals because we think that it's what we're supposed to do. And so if you can ask yourself the question, like, what do I actually want? What do I actually care most about? How do I want to feel while I run my business? If you can answer that, it's probably going to be very enlightening for you. So asking yourself that question and then evaluating, what are the scarcity-based thoughts that I have? What are the scarcity-based behaviors that I have? What are the things that throw me into, that forward focus, blinders on, inability to see, think, or feel outside of that? And then once you recognize those things, then you have to start actively choosing the opposite. And this is not an easy process. And it's one that usually requires a pretty decent amount of accountability and a thought partner to where, hey, I'm thinking about this. This just happens. Usually when this happens, it throws me into this. Okay, let's talk through this. Let's talk about, what does the opposite look like here? Let's talk about the level of discomfort that you're experiencing. Let's talk about how that discomfort is serving you and how it's aligned with the higher goal. Those are the kinds of conversations that I'm having back and forth with clients. And so I want you to know that as a business owner, you're always going to be ambitious and driven and goal-oriented. What I'm asking you is to evaluate what you really want and to give yourself permission to be uncomfortable so that you can not only achieve goals that are fulfilling to you because they're aligned with your desires, but so that you can enjoy what you've already done, so that you can celebrate what you've already done, so that you can look back to help you gain the energy to move forward. So I hope that this is helpful for you today. I hope it's given you something to think about. If you are seeking a true thought partner that can help you advise in the tactical pieces of your business to set things up and organize things in a way that you feel confident and clear, and you also want to be able to talk through these hard, deeper things and challenge the way that you're operating, my suggestion to you is that you either book a consultation call with me, which the link will be in the show notes, or that you go ahead and put yourself on my wait list and we will reach out to you when a spot opens. I'm so excited for all the women that I'm partnering with in 2025, and I'm excited to truly help women not only succeed externally, but to feel successful internally. Thanks for listening.